Brad Blanton, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I've already given a bit of an intro of who you are and what it is that you do, but I always like to give my guests an opportunity to brag about themselves and describe themselves in their own words. So, if you wouldn't mind taking a second and telling us who you are and how amazing you are.
Hmm. Well, I'm an old fart. I'm 77 years old. I'll be 78 in about 4 months. And so I get the stature of being an old fart without even having to prove it. I've published about, I don't know, 8 or 9 books. And I am busy traveling around the world. I have a business called Radical Honesty Enterprises, and we have about 45 trainers trained all around the world. There are about 80 workshops run in Europe in the last year, and about 30 or so over here in the United States. And I'm doing a trainer's training twice a year, one in Europe and one in the U.S. And there are lots of followers. I don't know how many, but my book, Radical Honesty, the first book, which came out 25 years ago, is still selling at the same rate it was when it became a bestseller. So it's like basically, well, a big boost recently has been from Donald Trump. Donald Trump is such a wonderful poster child for the opposite of honesty. And everybody can tell he's a lying, miserable son of a bitch. And people are looking for, is there any alternative to this pile of horse shit? And sure enough, they say, well, this thing's called Radical Honesty. Let's try that. So audiobook sales and regular book sales have doubled in the last year and a half. And I would really thank Donald Trump for being such a clear, idiotic, fascist asshole.
Amazing.
Certainly has helped me. Yeah.
Hey, you did say that he was going to bring more jobs and bring more revenue back into America, and you've experienced
and sure
that.
enough, he has done that for me.
There you go. He kept his promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one part in your book that I absolutely loved, and I want to get into it in a little bit here. You mentioned when you let go of changing yourself with regards to lying and whatnot, and admit who you are, that's when you can actually change and get different results. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that. So for anyone who's not familiar with radical honesty, what is that? What is the concept of radical honesty? It actually sounds pretty scary. When I first heard it, I was terrified by it.
Well, it's radical because it's not conventionally taught. We're taught to lie systematically by our parents and teachers and our culture. From the time we're very little, we're taught to pretend and act like we're more, smarter, better, quicker, gooder than we actually are. And we work on promoting our image because we're taught to promote our image from the time we're children. And what's radical about honesty is simply that it violates the conventional rules for lying. The conventional rules for lying are that you make it by faking it till you make it, and and you basically, if you can con people into believing that you're really great, and they say, "Oh, you're really great," that'll be a reward, but it's not. You already know you're the one that conned them into it, and you know it was all bullshit what you told them. And so even if they buy it, you know it's bullshit at the heart because you're the one that ginned it. And that's a problem because you then get launched on this career of trying to convince everybody that your lies are true because you believe if everybody believes your lies are true, then they will be. And this is one of the dilemmas Donald Trump has. He constantly lies, hoping that if enough people believe it, it'll be true.
I mean, when it comes to life and nature, I mean, we kind of want to succeed because we want to have resources, because being poor and being without resources and being lonely, well, I guess there's two directions. I think that there's, being lonely for relationships, and then also career-wise and business-wise of, I want to be able to succeed in life and feel relatively comfortable financially. I want to have a house or a roof over my head, comfortably not drowning in debt, and be able to eat good food and take care of my body, and hopefully people that I care about. So, I mean, a lot of people do this, especially in the finance world. I when I got out of the Army, I was going into finance to become a financial advisor. And one of the things that I was taught was just fake it. Just act as though you've got lots of money, and then you'll start to make sales, and then you will have lots of money, and then you won't be lying anymore. And that's actually a huge reason why I got. Actually, that's one of the primary reasons. There was two. That was one of the primary reasons that I got out.
That's the best example of what I was talking about I could come up with. Good. Thank you for the good example. You know from your experience.
Yeah.
That you got really tired of your own having to bullshit other people.
Yeah, but then I ended up plummeting into financial turmoil because of it. So
okay.
I mean, I'm much better for it now. But I definitely went through a hellhole. But I mean, if that's the point of lying, is to be able to succeed and be perceived as strong, so that we don't get taken advantage of, and that we can succeed, then isn't there some merit to lying?
The problem is there's some merit to being able to have a good imagination, to being able to pretend. It's like my favorite people in the world are from about 6 months of age to about 12 years of age, where we play lots of pretend games. We play like we're Star Wars heroes or whatever's the most recent cartoon characters on movies and stuff. I like playing with little kids. I love kids because they say, let's pretend something, and we'll get completely into a pretend game, and we'll pretend and pretend. It's a lot of fun. The problem is that about 10 or 11 or 12 years of age, we start playing that pretend game at another level. We start pretending that we're not pretending when we are.
Can you say that again? We stop pretending.
We start pretending that we're not pretending when we are.
Ah.
That's another name for lying.
Yes.
So, but it's a pretend game that sounds like fun because all the other pretend games, they're fun to play like you're a hero and that you went out and that you save the people or do the great task or whatever. It's a lot of fun to pretend that. It's a fun to pretend that you're doing that even when you know you aren't, and see if you can convince other people that you are. So we all pretend that we're some kind of virtuous hero rather than stumble bums. And so the truth is we're all a bunch of stumble bum attempting to be virtuous heroes and heroines, not doing such a great job of it, and pretty lying about when we fail, and not telling the truth about what we know. We withhold what we know about ourselves in order to improve our image. And that's the most pernicious form of lying, is withholding. And so what happens is this new game of pretending that you're not pretending when you are is very complicated. And it's the reason that adolescents are all completely stone fucking crazy. and they're still fun to play with and stuff, but basically you had to look at them, say to them, talk to them, presume of them that they're crazy. They're in their minds coming up with all kinds of bullshit about what ought to be done or they should do or whatever. And as long as you can play with it and run around circles just like you would with a younger kid, that's okay. But when they start taking it seriously, this is a problem, because then you start trying to say some lies are better than other lies. And then some things that I've done I don't want you to know about because I want you to think better of me than that will make you think of me. So you start manipulating your image as you imagine it is in the minds of other people. And that's what most lying comes from, an attempt to shape in the minds of other people what you imagine they will think about you as the pathway to success, as your boss told you when you got into financial advising and gave you the conventional bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess using the principles of radical honesty, I could have used that as I could have obviously made different choices financially, but then also admitted to clients like, oh, so are you doing this? Or you, it's like, well, I could have even said things along the lines of, not yet, because to be honest, I'm new to the financial industry. I'm not making huge amounts of money, but I've been studying this for a long time, and this is where I want to go with my life. And I truly believe that with the mentorship that I have, I'll be able to help you out. Something along those lines, I guess, could be.
Yeah, that sounds better to me.
Yeah.
It still sounds a little flowery. You say, no, I don't really know shit. I just think it's a good idea to learn it.
yeah, I know. But that's the scary thing too, is like, how do you work with that? Like, because if I said something like that and it wasn't very confident, then I would end up losing a client, and then I wouldn't have any money. And then,
So then you would say to him, I'm afraid to tell you this because I'm afraid you won't think I'm confident enough, and then I'll lose you as a client. Tell them that. That would be honest. And then they would say, oh, well, thanks for telling me.
I'm going to go somewhere else now with someone who's been doing this for 5 years.
They would. They say, well, maybe we can learn together or something like that. They would be open to you being open to learning what you needed to learn in order to be successful as a financial advisor, and they would be the proof that you were. You all would get together in a positive conspiracy rather than one based on lying.
Yeah, it's still pretty scary because of so many opportunities that I think that could end up being missed. But I think that
that's right. But your mind is not very trustworthy. You've got a story about how you would mess up a good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing is, there's nothing like messing up good opportunities for learning.
This is
you
actually
learn
true.
So much. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of true as well. I mean, we would think that being honest in that sense would lead you like it would take longer to find success because you'd be honest about your incompetencies. But by doing that, you would actually end up creating genuine relationships with people because you're not lying. And then you are going to actually fail probably a lot more upfront, but you're going to learn a lot more, a lot faster because you're actually being completely honest about what's going on around you.
And you're also closer to your client because they appreciate honesty. I swear people do, in fact, appreciate it when you're vulnerable and tell the truth about your uncertainty. And it takes a degree of confidence to be able to do that. You could also say, if you're honest, most people in the financial industry don't know shit from shinola about it. And most of the people that have plenty of money are only out to rip off people that have a little bit less so they can have more. And there's a lot of assholes at the tops of a lot of corporations that have to do with financial advice and manipulation of money. And there's a lot of twist in the whole capitalist system, and that the whole world is partially kept at war because it's a profitable thing, that capitalism is a kill-for-profit system, and that basically you're participating in a corrupt system, and so are they, and you ought to both be ashamed of yourselves. Now, what are we going to do with your goddamn money? If you start out talking like that, they'd say, whoa, wait, whoa. You'd say, what are you whoaing about? And then you're engaged in a conversation that's a personal, contactful conversation where your values and judgments are being actually shared, and so are the other person's. And even if they oppose each other, there's a certain baseline gratitude for someone being directly honest to you, even if they disagree with you.
Yeah, there's opportunity for real intimacy, especially when you take that lead of sharing yourself and you are being vulnerable. Then that lets your guard down and lets the other person know, oh, wow, this person's guard is down. I guess I might be able to lower my guard a bit here too. And then offer something that maybe they believe, or maybe some of their own fears or vulnerabilities.
Or some of their stories about what worked or what didn't work, which is what you want.
Yeah. Now,
personal stories.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the teenagers and adolescents and people pretending because they want to be seen as a virtuous person, I see this a lot nowadays. People really are more concerned with being seen as a good person than they are about recognizing how they're actually kind of a shitty individual.
Yeah, right. So to me, good people are people that admit that they're kind of a shitty individual. So
it's very true. Yeah. Yeah, there was something, I wrote it down here. I'm going to see if I can find this here. The truth isn't just about our fears and insecurities or what makes us angry, but it's also our truth. Our truth is also our desire to hurt other people or be manipulative, and recognizing those aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, that we're mean and that we're petty and that we're selfish.
Arrogant.
And that we're greedy and we're arrogant. But if you are arrogant out loud, admittedly, not just arrogant and secretly using to manipulate, or if you're mean out loud, it's kind of like stand-up comedy. And they can be mean out loud back to you. And you can say, geez, that hurts. Yeah, it does hurt a little bit, doesn't it? Then you can identify with each other. Say, it only hurts assholes. Oh, yeah, that must be. How'd you know it hurt me then? But the point is that you're talking at a level other than trying to con each other. You're actually joking with each other, laughing at hard things in life,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it comes to withholding, because you'd mentioned withholding just a couple of minutes ago. If if I'm going into a job, and let's say I'm building and let's say I don't like the job and I don't want to be there for very long, but I need the money because I need a job. If I tell my boss or tell the person that's hiring me, I think that the people here are weirdos. I don't really like the culture, and I am only applying to this job simply because I need to get paid and I need to I need to afford to live. And this seems like an easy opportunity for me. I'm probably not going to be here for very long because it's always easier to find a job when you actually have a job. And I'm just looking to get any kind of job at this point so I can be here for a couple of months and then go get another job that I
Yeah,
actually really
well,
like.
wouldn't that be something? If somebody told me that and I'd say I'd hire them right now. There's a
You,
joke I like that's about that. Basically, I think that would be a great thing to say. That would be to say, "What? What do you mean telling me all this? You're not supposed to say that." And they would all be, "What in the world? Come in here. Look at this guy." One of my favorite jokes. I told this at a TED talk I did uh, in Lithuania, I think it was. There's a story about a woman went for a job interview, and she'd interviewed a couple people, and she was interviewing the main boss, who would be the one to make the decision to hire her. And his first question was, "What do you consider to be your worst characteristic?" And she said, "Honesty." And he said, "Well, I don't think honesty is a bad characteristic." And she said, "I don't give a fuck what you think." So my question to everybody was, would you hire her? I would hire her in a nanosecond. That's who I'm looking for. If somebody come right back at me, be up against me, be with me, hear me, say whatever the hell is on their mind, and we engage. They're not going to like try to con me or manipulate me or act like things are different because they want to gain favor.
now,
So I would hire her in an instant.
yeah, I guess that's picking up something for me. I mean, I think some people use their honesty as a way to actually avoid vulnerability and just to push people away, and then using honesty as an excuse to be just a complete bitch or an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm just honest. I was like, no, you're actually kind of a dick. So,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
So if you say that, that's kind of honest. You're leading them in the right direction. That's,
well,
people say Donald Trump is honest. I say, yeah, he's honest, but he's a goddamn idiot. Yeah. Okay, but you have something in addition to honesty. You have to have more than honesty, but you must have at baseline honesty in order to have a relationship that has any power for you, or to have the relationship have any power. You have to have a level of sharing that's deeper than just superficial.
okay, so you're saying that it's basically like you're not just sharing your judgments about the other person. I'm just honest. You're actually saying your own vulnerabilities and what make you a human being and how you can recognize yourself in that person.
Yeah, yeah, and you might when people say I'm just being honest, it's usually bullshit. You know, you say every time I've heard that it's been bullshit. So I imagine it's bullshit when you say it too. And they say, "What do you mean bullshit?" I mean that when you say you're just being honest, you already feel guilty about being an asshole and hurting somebody's feelings, and you're acting like it's beyond your control and it's all bullshit. So what is it you were just being honest about? Say that again, and then listen to it and see what it is as an authentic expression of what they want to say. They might resent something that you like. That's okay. You can still engage and talk about that. And you can say, "I resent you for resenting that." And they can say, "Well, I resent you for resenting me for resenting it for that." And then you get to a place where you both kind of laugh, but you're there in the room and nobody has any axe to grind because the axe has already been ground. And so then you say, "Well, what are we going to do?" "Well, maybe I'm not a good fit here. We don't want to hire you." Okay, that's fine. It'd be better to make that choice then than it would 6 months later, after you're further in debt, and then still get your job lost anyway.
This is yes, yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely like that you highlighted that when someone's saying I'm just being honest, it's actually because it's just a bunch of bullshit, and that they're usually hiding something that's in there. So you just ask them again and just ask them to be a little bit more genuine and go into it. I mean, at what point could people use their honesty as a way and using it as a way to hurt someone else? You had mentioned, I mean, there's two aspects in here that I wanted to touch on with regards to cheating. You'd mentioned that if you cheated on your partner, tell them what you did with them, how many times you came, what you did, what positions you used, all those things. And it just seems to me as though, I could use my honesty as a way to hurt the other person. Even if I am being vulnerable myself, I could end up using it as a means to hurt the other person. And and I think that's also the tying into I'm just being honest. No, you're using your judgments or your honesty to hurt the other person. You're not being vulnerable yourself, so fuck you.
But I don't know. You can be honest and hurt the other person. I recommend that you do. I recommend that you offend people, and I recommend that you hurt people's feelings. And I also recommend that you stick with them after they've been offended or had their feelings hurt until they get over feeling hurt, until they get over being angry. Because getting over being angry and feeling hurt usually takes only about 90 seconds or so if you're detailed and honest. So if I resent you for something and I tell you exactly what you said, I resent you for saying that cost $600 when it costs actually $750. I resent you for saying that. And you say, well, I resent you for resenting me. And you sit there and look at each other. And what happens is the great value of this whole learning about radical honesty is the simple principle: if you experience an experience, it comes and goes. But if you resist experiencing an experience, it persists. And one of the main ways of resisting your experience is trying to understand or trying to explain your experience while you're in your head trying to rationalize it, justify it, explain it, sell it, etc. You're not having the experience. You're trying to justify having the experience and trying to play like it isn't there and get away from it. So I recommend that you hurt people's feelings, but stay with them until they get over being hurt. And so you say, this is what I did, and I know it hurts your feelings. They say, oh, I hate you for doing that. No, I don't blame you. And they say, I resent you for doing that. I resent you for saying that. I resent you for telling me. I don't blame you. And I appreciate you for saying you resented me. And you keep on going like that. You keep the connection. See, the difference between this and political warfare is that you don't kill each other or abandon each other. You actually fight each other, but you stay with the experience until it comes and goes. And what happens with anger is it intensifies. It gets worse when you name it. And you get a more rapid heartbeat. And you get more sensations in your chest and your arm muscles. And you get more excited and a more rapid heart rate. And you stay with it. And you tell them whatever else comes up as you do it. And then eventually that heart rate and that energy recede. They increase, then they decrease, then they fade and go away. And the better you are at being specific about what they did, exactly what they said, or exactly what they did that you resent, then the better chance you have of efficiently having it come and go. When it comes and goes, you still may have the same values you had, but you're not as attached to making the person wrong. And you're not as attached to being righteous about how they're evil and wicked and rotten and so forth. And what happens is you say, okay, I still don't like that you did that, but I'm over it. I'm not as mad at you as I was. Because one of the ways you get over being mad is by being mad, being honest about it, being related to the person, related to your own body, telling them the truth about what goes through your mind and what goes on in your body, until what happens is you experience the experience fully enough that it increases, then decreases, then recedes, then goes away. And then you experience something called forgiveness. which is the most valuable thing there is to learn about interacting with other human beings. It's how to get over things. That's why my online course is called How to Get Over Shit and Be Happy.
I like the course name.
Good.
I think you had mentioned something in your book that, and you were quoting someone in one of your really long quotes that you had mentioned at the beginning of the book. Some of your publishers, wouldn't want to publish you because I quote too long and like all that stuff. I think it's great. I think you had mentioned, I can't remember who it was, but when we can recognize our own assumptions and our own, I'm not sure, maybe it was your book, I'm not sure, I read and listen to a lot, but essentially is when I can recognize my own assumptions and my own perceptions of the world, and I can truly understand them, then it immediately bridges the gap between myself and the other people, because I can start to understand the assumptions of other people, at which point my anger starts to build compassion for the other person because I can see myself in the other person. It's something to that effect. I mean, there's more to it, but I mean, that was just one thing that I was recognizing in that. And that's also how I can learn to forgive another person, is when I can see their humanity and when I can see why they would do the things that they did, because I can see and recognize those parts of myself, because I'm not necessarily, at that point, I'm kind of forgiving myself for those components as well.
So I would say at the beginning of that you have to distinguish between assumptions and perceptions. When you say perceptions and assumptions, you're talking about two different classes of material. Okay?
Yes.
So perceptions are more reliable because they're sensate moment-to-moment experiences. So I perceive, I hear, I see you. That's a perception. But a conception, an assumption, is not just what you say or do, it's the meaning I make out of it. And one of the things that causes conflict to persist is that people can't distinguish between their reaction to something and the meaning they make out of it. That's what we get into in detail in Radical Honesty, is when people start saying what the meaning is that they made out of something. And then they clarify, and usually the meaning is not exactly the same as the other person intended, or even if it is, you can still get over it. Because you can be mad, and then it recedes and goes away. You can say, okay, well, we can still talk about it, and I'm not as mad as I was. Those gradations of forgiveness are critical. That's one of the reasons why in international relations, they're completely screwed up. They say, basically, you either have war or you have diplomacy. The alternative to war is diplomacy. And you're either going to use war or diplomacy. It's completely screwed up. Diplomacy is not the alternative to war. And if diplomacy is anything, it's the primary cause of war. And neither war nor diplomacy are worth a shit. Diplomacy is fucking just more bullshit, where secretiveness is considered to be security. We think our security depends on secrecy. That's why we have the CIA and the FBI and 30 other security agencies, because everybody's so concerned about keeping their treatments, their secrets, so that some other asshole like them doesn't find out what they know. Yeah. That works just great. The world is an example of how well that works. And what we know in the psychodynamic world, what we know in the world of psychotherapy, the last 120 years since Freud, what we've learned is that secrecy is not security. Secrecy is just bullshit. It's just another form of lying. The most pernicious form of lying is simply withholding, not mentioning what you know. And that's the poison that kills most relationships. And that's the source of war for most wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, war is ultimately just a war that's going on between a couple of individuals, and some individuals happen to have an entire nation behind them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back into the thing that you had mentioned about staying around after you were honest. Because I think that's another thing that people think, well, if I'm just honest, I tell this person, I just completely destroy their lives. And then leave away, and then well, I was honest, and now this person is left in shambles. Now I can leave. My conscience is clear. Right. What you did was you mentioned stick around.
That's what we call a drive-by.
A drive-by honesty.
Yeah, fuck you, and then take off.
No, I like that you highlight you brought in the compassion that's behind it. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to be honest, if you're really being honest, you're also being vulnerable with yourself and honest with your own motivations. So you're showing compassion in that moment and letting that person have their anger and their resentment and working through that. That's a lot different than someone saying, I'm just being honest, or using their honesty as a way to hurt the other person of, I cheated on you, I had sex with this many people, we did this, I liked it, I don't like you anymore, bye-bye. I mean, those are two different conversations. The one that I just said, and then the one that's saying, I had sex with these people, this is why, this is how I was feeling.
Well, the honesty needs to start way before the affairs.
Yes, it should. Right? It should, yeah.
But if it's going to end or not end, honesty is what has to be done to clean it up, so that there's a possibility for the future.
Why did you say to share all those things, like, I came this many times, we used these positions? Why is that information relevant?
Because each detail is something that they can specifically resent and get over. Whereas you give global interpretations. Oh, she was so beautiful and I loved her so much I couldn't help myself and she wanted it and so I did it. That's all the bullshit of the explanation about why. But what we're interested in is how, not why. How did you do it? And how did you go about doing it? And do you own that you're the one who did it? You created everything. You're the creator of your life. You created having sex with the other person. You created lying to your mate about it. You created the dilemma of what you experience now. You created her finding out about it some way. The point is that you are a standard operating, thinking person, which means you fuck up your life 20 times a day. Because there's anything that can't be trusted, it's a human mind. We all trust our minds. It's a terrible mistake from the beginning. You show me someone with a mind, and I'll show you someone who's completely fucked up, period.
Speak for yourself, Brad. I'm perfect. That's what my mama says. I'm perfect and beautiful.
Good. Tell your mama said never mind.
There was another thing that you had said as well. I mean, like all this chitter chatter of. So, for example, in the one person, their mind might be thinking, "Oh, what did they do? What didn't they do?" And that's creating anxiety. And you yourself of withholding certain things. There's all this anxiety of these things that I'm not sharing. Should I share it? Like, what am I hiding? That actually, like all that chitter chatter, is energy that's being given up towards that anxiety, which actually could just be released towards love and connection towards people that you really care about.
Well, what happens is you got to get over what you're blocking still. So what happens when people actually confess the details of their affairs is not as romantic and wonderful as the imagining of their partner about how great it was. First of all, we went up there, and then it was too cold. We turned on the heater, and the heater kept coming on and interrupting, and I couldn't get it up the first time we tried. And I got mad at her slobbering on me when we kissed. And then we actually got it going. We were both so grateful we could actually fuck. I came immediately. She was dissatisfied. And I told her to touch herself in front of me, but she didn't want to. She was still embarrassed. So it turned out kind of... And when you tell those details, what happens is they think, well, you poor son of a bitch, it wasn't that great, was it?
Serves you right for having a shitty sexual experience when you try to have an affair.
Right.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, God. Okay. You talk a lot about principles and how being moralists it's literally killing us. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to get into that a little bit more. Can you why are people so... Yeah, can we talk about moralism? I actually see this a lot in a lot of the conversations online nowadays. And I think it's... Yeah, I see it quite a bit.
Yeah, it's that whether you pass judgment about right and wrong is the most important thing in the world. Is to be right and to not be wrong is the most important thing in the world, is what your mind knows. It's not the most important thing in the world. It's not very goddamn important at all. The being righteous is like, again, I can't help but refer to Donald Trump, who's making me rich as we speak. he's obviously
it's a love-hate relationship.
A ridiculous. He's all ridiculously self-righteous prick, and he's self-righteous about opposite sides of the coin within like a minute. He can be a self-righteous, moralistic jerk on the one side of an issue, and then a minute later he can be a moralistic, self-righteous jerk on the other side of an issue. He doesn't look happy. He doesn't act happy. He's always embroiled and having little fits and firing people and getting upset and running and playing golf instead of talking to people. He's such a great poster child for moralistic bullshit. And Pence is even worse. Like the whole gang of right-wing fundamentalist Christians are a self-righteous bunch of moralists about what people should or shouldn't do. If you get pregnant, you should kill the baby, but you can't do that because it's against God's rule to have an abortion, and they're all tied up in one kind of moralistic thing or another.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the whole pro-life thing just makes me, I get a little irritated thinking about it.
Uh-huh.
I'm pro-choice personally, but so I kind of see this whole moralism thing as dogmatic belief, and you see it. For example, you're referring to Trump, and I see it for like a lot of with the social justice warriors, the radical left. I see the same sort of thing of living this dogma and this idea of being moral, and yeah, I mean that's I definitely see it on both sides. Now, when it comes to morals, though,
I do too, but the moralism on the left is better than the moralism on the right.
I'm not so sure I completely agree. I mean, if we go to the extremes on either side, the extremes on both sides are pretty dangerous. I consider myself center left. But but
the extremes, as long as the extremes don't kill people, it's okay to be extreme, cuss people out, get mad, raise hell, slobber, jump up and down, holler, and stick with each other. Because it's okay with me if a leftist cusses a rightist completely out, and it's okay if a rightist cusses a leftist completely out. Only the rightists don't do it very much because they're such moralistic, self-righteous speakers. So the left has more fun, you may have noticed, because they can cuss more and get by with it, and all their self-righteous can do is quote scripture and show how they're right. The thing is that you can have the feelings that go along with the righteousness, and then eventually come to a place where you say, well, I realize I'm being very self-righteous about this, and then I'm the only right solution in the world, and I'm being arrogant, and I imagine that I don't know as much as I'm playing like I know, or something like that. You can report that you might have overstepped your own bounds when you've overstepped them, but you can't if you don't overstep them. So being careful is a very unrecommended thing. I don't recommend you be careful. I think you're better off being careless.
That actually leads me into something like a personal question from a friend of mine who has used the principles from your book. I'll get into that in a second, though. I want to finish off an idea around moralism. Don't morals? I mean, if we just forego. If we're no longer moralists, I actually think that we would all wind up being closer to center than we would on the outskirts, because we'd also recognize our own shit, and we'd also recognize how fucked up we all are.
Well, I distinguish between morality and moralism. Moralism is a dedicated faith and belief in righteousness.
Okay,
and
that was
it's okay. Yeah. I have moral values in spite of myself. I have lots of moral values. It's the degree of attachment to them and the intensity of the imposition of them that moralism reflects. Moralism is a disease to think that being right and not being wrong is the most important thing in the world. Whereas if you're just morally, you say, I want to honor the being of another being. I don't want to put you in jail for life for having had a beer.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of,
or smoking a joint.
Yeah.
You're going to go to jail for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And he's 16. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a little excessive.
I ran for Congress about maybe 10 years ago. I ran against Eric Cantor, and he was my congressman in my district. I knew I didn't have a chance in hell, but there wasn't any Democrat running. And so I ran as an independent. I spent about $80,000 of my own money and raised about $80,000. And he spent $1.5 million, and I got 25% of the vote.
Really?
Which I thought was a record for an independent in Virginia. But the way that I campaigned was on a radical honesty ticket. So reporters would come and ask me, have you ever used any of the illegal drugs? I said, I've used every illegal drug known to man 3 or 4 times. I've been smoking marijuana for 45 years, and I intend to smoke it when I'm in Congress. And they just finally gave up on trying to question me because the stuff I had to say about myself was so much worse than what they could dream up.
And you're like Doug Ford from Toronto, smoking
Lord,
crack.
I got lots and lots of publicity from it because, I only had one basic commercial where I said all this. Listen up, I got a minute to tell you this stuff. And I told him I'm running against Eric Cantor because he's an asshole. He doesn't know. And there have to be some intelligent people in this district. So if you're an intelligent person, here's a chance to register that you're here. Vote for me. So I got 25% of the vote. So I restored my faith there. 25% of the people in the district were intelligent.
Yeah, and the rest of the people who didn't vote on you probably just didn't even know about you because the other guy was spending so much more money on his marketing.
Maybe. I don't know. I wasn't very famous. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I knew I didn't have a chance of winning, but it was fun to run in a campaign where the assumption is you're supposed to hide everything and go ahead and tell everything.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Now there's a friend of mine who was using these principles, and he was a pickup artist. He was following some of the biggest pickup artists in Vancouver, and this is years ago. And I think like 7 years ago or something, when he found your book. And he would go up to girls and he would say, usually at the club, he would go up to a woman and say, "Hi, I want to fuck you. I'm talking to you because I want to have sex with you, but I'm also really scared that I might not be big enough, or that I won't last long enough, or that you won't like me. I'm also scared that you're going to reject me, but I also really want to get to know you because I think you're gorgeous, and I don't want to be sitting there or standing alone by myself, and that's why I'm here to talk to you."
So how did that work for him?
He said that it was more often than not, most women responded by saying, "Oh my God, did you just say that? That's thank you for saying that. Oh my," and then they would actually wind up having a great conversation. But sometimes people would get really angry, and they would just they would get really angry and then, leave. All I could think is, like, I'm a rock climber. I go to the climbing gym, and it's hard to not notice a lot of very fit women in Lululemons, in tights, up on the wall. It's like you're looking. It's like it's right there. Their ass is right there, and all I can think is, I want to have sex with a lot of these women. I do. But I can't go into that place and go up to and introduce myself to every woman that I want to have sex with and say, "Hey, I'm Ryan. I want to have sex with you."
I don't know.
And then just leave it. I mean,
since you have the question, you might try it and see how it works.
It's just, I guess, there's a fear that if I were to start doing things like that, that I would be labeled,
the problem is
there's
what
that
you said
creepy
about
guy.
your friend. The problem is there were too many things. They were overwhelmed with 15 assertions on your part without any chance to say anything back. Because you said, basically, I want to have sex with you. I think you're attractive. I don't want to be here alone. You list all these things.
Yeah.
If you just come on like that, they'd think, well, never mind. You don't shut up enough for me.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, like, how much do you volunteer up front? Especially in relationships sometimes too, and people volunteer. I'm in love with you. Sometimes it works out great and people it's like, wow, he was honest right up front. He said that he was in love with me. I wasn't
Well,
ready.
but see,
Blah, blah, blah.
these
Sometimes it
are
pushes
all
people away.
interpretations. I'm in love with you is an interpretation.
Sure.
So if you get it down to funkier language, we talk about I resent you for or I appreciate you for. So you can say I really appreciate you for the way your ass looked when you were climbing up on that wall. And then let her say something. She says, well, good. I don't blame you. I think I got a great ass. Yeah, you sure do. And then you go on the rest of the conversation.
If they give you an opportunity to actually have a conversation, because now you're the creepy guy who's staring at her ass and just commenting on her ass in a place where she probably doesn't want to get hit on or be sexualized in any way. I mean, I believe in objectification. Like, objectifying is completely fine, so long as it's also balanced with an understanding that you're talking to a person. So,
but you see, you got a certain moralism about it. See, you're careful to make sure that you do it right. So I'm encouraging you to do it wrong. See what happens, because you may be wrong about what's wrong.
The risk is too high.
All you do is get rejected, or she'll say, "Get the sucker out of here. We can't climb without him looking at my ass. That bothers me."
Oh God, yeah. I don't. I've been, ever since I first read your book, I'm like, I can't bring myself to do it because I'm just scared. I am scared of doing that and experimenting. Just to see what the reactions would be, but then also getting a reputation of being a guy who makes women uncomfortable. I mean, because right. I mean, it's one thing to be in touch with your sexuality. It's another thing. I think it's another thing to go up to women in an environment like that and just make those kinds of comments.
But my general feedback to you is that your tendency is to talk too much.
I can.
If you say to her, "I'm afraid of you giving me a bad reputation," well, if I tell you I really like the way your ass looked when you're climbing that wall, she'd say, "Well, you ought to be," or whatever she says. The point is, you need to say short things and then shut up and see what happens. Because the one you can tell is that you're nervous about that is because you're talking too much.
Oh, well, yeah, I am nervous about it. I am nervous thinking about something like that.
Yeah. Well, so you need to say to her, the most honest thing is, I'm nervous now and I'll probably talk too much. You know what makes me nervous is your ass. Your ass looked too good to me and I'm so nervous I thought I can't really say what's on my mind. So that's it. That was what was on my mind. And she'll say, well, it's on a lot of people's minds. That's why I wear those tight pants.
Yeah, that's true. This is where I was thinking, well, my pants just got a lot tighter, so.
Yeah. So again, what happens is that the nervousness shows up in talking too much, and you are telling yourself the moral rule that you shouldn't talk about certain things, certain ways. And so you keep scaring yourself by picking on yourself. Your own internal judge is leading.
Yeah.
And your internal judge is your mind, and it basically is untrustworthy. So the thing is, when you think you're sure you're right, you probably aren't. So you have to experiment, and then you'll be right. You experiment by saying to 20 women in one day, nice ass, really like watching you laugh. And you see how many of them reject you and how many of them call them and say, get him out of this gym, we don't want him here anymore.
And then, and how many start a YouTube video of catcalling? Catcalling is brutal. Yeah. Oh, boy. Now, I guess I want to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think that there's some...
Well, the conversation about that is a great conversation because it's a conversation about honesty. I really like it. So.
Yeah. I think, again, that the whole... What you definitely touch on quite a bit in your book and so far in this conversation is that it's also being tapped into your vulnerability within that honesty. Not being... So... it's being tapped into that vulnerability within that honesty. Mm-hmm. So that I think is what differentiates harsh and superficial honesty versus like genuine, honest expression.
Yeah, or what we call radical honesty includes the genuine, honest expression, and brutal honesty is what we call the unmitigated, just being mean to hurt somebody.
Mm. You mentioned something in your book, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. You had said intimacy is grown into when people aren't playing roles because they don't have anything to hide and can relate freely. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Mm. Well, when you share with other people your faults as well as your virtues and your struggles as well as your successes, they can identify with you so much more than they can if all you're doing is a sales pitch. They can identify with your sales pitch and say, well, that sounds a lot like my sales pitch. But what they really like, my daughter, Carsey, is a singer-songwriter. She has a song called To Be Known. And her song is a really great song. It's about basically what we want is to be known. And what she means by that is to be actually known for who you are, not known for the pitch, not known for your sales pitch of who you are, but to actually be known. To have someone say, yeah, I know you. I know that. Me too. When they do that, that's a connection at a level deeper than the usual connection of just making an impression. And what we're after is to be known. And yet at the same time, we say, well, if I'm going to be known, I should be known in a certain way. And then we start trying to control the way that we're known. Then we're no longer sharing what's there to be known. We're only sharing a sales pitch. Nobody's too interested in living with nothing but a sales pitch. People are interested in actually living with people that they know and that they think know them.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a friend of mine, and he likes latex and spandex and things like that. That's sort of his kink.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And he used to go to escorts just for that experience. His partner doesn't know. I've told him that he needs to tell her that because, okay, well, are you prepared to, and he doesn't want to go to an escort or a dom, like a dominatrix while he's with her. Like, well, do you think that you'd be able to live the next 20 years never expressing that ever again? And maybe your partner would actually be open to it, even if you think that she might not be. If you're open in the right way, she might be. And even if not, then you might be able to find someone who is open to it. And he doesn't really want to, and he thinks that he can go quite a while without ever experiencing that. And he thinks that if he were to share it, that it would change the dynamic of the relationship considerably. And I'm curious, what would you say to him?
Well, his mind, like all minds, is just full of shit as a Christmas turkey. He postulates things that rationalize operating according to fear rather than having the courage to take a risk and find out what's so. So he could tell her, and if he ends up, she absolutely can't tolerate it and doesn't ever want to see him again, then he would lose his relationship with her. That's what his mind's telling him.
Yeah.
But the odds are very much against that. People tell me, oh, I couldn't tell my boss what I really think about him. I'd be fired. So I kept track for years and years and years. And I found that 96% of the people that told the truth to their boss about what they resented him for did not get fired. And it turned out that about 30% of them ended up getting a raise in pay and more responsibility within 3 months of doing the honest conversation.
No shit.
So that basically what happens is that honesty works better than your mind telling you, oh, no, you can't be honest about that because that'll run them off. I'm saying if it runs them off, fine. You can either have an alliance of two cowards or you can have one person who takes the risk of being actually intimate and the other one that takes them up on it, and then you got a whole new relationship.
Yeah, and then you're no longer in a relationship of posturing. You're not necessarily in a relationship of.
Yeah.
She's not in a relationship that she thinks she's in. When you're honest, you're actually giving your partner the opportunity to actually choose to be in a relationship with you, not the facade that you're putting up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It may mess up his thing with spandex too, though. Because it may not be as attractive as he used to be once he's got an honest relationship.
That is a good point.
Mm-hmm. So that's a threat too. Yeah.
That is a very, very good point. So, I mean, how do you handle the consequences then? Let's say, you end up losing your job. You end up losing a relationship with someone that you love. You end up getting ostracized from your family. I think a lot of people who come out as gay end up losing their entire family because they're being honest about what it is.
Not very often. No, actually, not often. Sometimes they do.
Sometimes, okay.
But they also don't know how to be honest about it and as thoroughly as they need to. If they're carefully honest about it, then they're likely to alienate their family. But if they're completely honest, saying, I'm a male and I like males, I prefer cocks to vaginas, and if you don't like it, you can kiss my ass. This is the first statement. And basically, whatever you resent or appreciate about the history in your family that made you feel good or bad about this, and then say, I want to know about you, and I'm going to live out loud and share this, and I'm not going to keep this big secret, and I'm not going to play like it's not true with you anymore. And if you all can't take that, then kick me out of the family. And you go through all kinds of gradations of that, but generally families stick together pretty good. Very seldom, like 2 instances I can think of over the course of like 40 years, where it was both times it was males who admitted they were gay, and their parents did in fact reject them and did keep the rejection going. 2 out of like, I don't know, hundreds. So it's like it's overestimated by the mind. Not that many people reject their kids for being gay. If there's
Yeah, I guess there's the other thing in my mind that if you happen to share something about as you were saying that, I was instantly starting to think about your relationship with your parents, and if you're honest about certain things, I actually did I'd done a little bit of a practice with one of my parents a few years ago, and my relationship with him has gotten a lot better. But it wasn't full. It wasn't everything. And if you're honest with someone, or even a partner as well, and they start getting really, really, really upset and start screaming and yelling, I guess using the technique that you had mentioned before of just sticking with it, just letting them be angry. And then you can continue to be honest, but
and stick with your reaction. If you don't like it when they yell, you yell back at them, and make the agreement. You'll stay mad at each other and stay with each other until something changes. Not walk out, run off, and do a drive-by.
Yeah, and that's also how families can fall apart, and people don't talk to each other for years because they're just stuck in the anger. They're not going to stick with each other when they're angry.
Okay, so you go and propose to him, I'm angry, I'm going to tell you about it, I want you to stick with me. If you don't, then you will be the one who left.
It's laying down the fucking gauntlet, that is.
Yes, it is.
That's like, when you challenge someone to a duel, you take off the little leather glove, you smack them. Well, you just took like one of those metal gloves from a knight, from one of those statues, throw it down in the ground.
Not that bad. No,
yeah,
your mind is making it bigger.
So how does this whole honesty thing relate to anger? We didn't end up getting into anger yet because there's just so much to talk about this. How do we alleviate some passive aggressiveness in us, or anger and resentment in us from honesty?
There's a whole chapter about anger in my book, Practicing Radical Honesty. And there's a whole chapter about anger in Radical Honesty. And it's a big chapter because anger is one of the things we have a hard time getting over in our culture, because the history of our whole Judeo-Christian tradition is to play like anger isn't there when it is. And to be able to be angry and get over it is also called forgiveness. And basically, even though forgiveness is an ideal of our tradition, it's seldom accomplished because of the taboo against anger. So I recommend that people be honest about their anger. They be specific about what it was the person said or did that made them angry. They tell them about it. They tell them about it again. As long as they still feel it, they tell them about it again. And they have an increase in anger, and they get louder and more confrontive, and they stay with it, and then it recedes a little bit. They stay with that. Usually that then changes into laughter or tears or some other things. Then some more anger emerges, but they stay with each other. And what happens is they experience the experience, and it recedes. Then it comes up again, and it recedes. And when you experience an experience, it comes, and then it goes. And once it goes away, you can say, well, I'm not angry at you anymore about that. I still don't want you to do it to me again, and I'm over it. And they'll say, well, good, thank you for forgiving me, and then you make some agreements based on what you know about each other rather than on what you're trying to do to control the other person to avoid an experience on your part. So when you're trying to control people in order to avoid certain experiences, that's the wrong path. The idea is to go ahead and invite them to have the experience with you and ask them to stick with you until you get over it. And so when you say to someone, even your father or mother, who might be mad at you for what you're mad at them about, I'm mad at you, whether it's justified or not, I want to forgive you. I'm doing this in order to get over it. I'm doing this in order to forgive you. Whether it's right or wrong to be angry at you doesn't matter. I'm here in order to get over it. And I'd like you to stick with me so that I can. And almost all parents will say, okay, go for it. And then they'll actually come on board and start doing it themselves, which makes for real. I've had a call before from a parent that said, we just had our Thanksgiving, and it was the worst Thanksgiving we've ever had. And it's because my son's been in therapy with you, and he came home and it ruined everything about the whole family. We want you to know that we think this radical honesty is a bunch of crap. And then right after Christmas, I got a phone call, the same guy. Hey, listen, we just had the best Christmas we ever had this for our family. I want to take back what I said to you about Thanksgiving. And I'm looking forward to the future of our ongoing family life. And thanks a lot for radical honesty. Takes a while sometimes.
Yeah. I guess it's having the courage to go into the shit.
Yeah.
To recognize that it's going to get a little bit better afterwards. A lot better after.
Yeah.
But being willing to go through some shit up front.
Yeah.
To let go of the facade of a life that you think that you've created based on the lies that you've told everyone and yourself. And yeah, I love it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I do, and I'm gonna start practicing some of the scary vulnerability stuff. I'm going to attempt.
Okay. Good luck.
Oh my God, I've actually got a lump in my throat thinking about it. Just like the risks. I mean, when it comes to the radical honesty, I've been using it quite a lot around people who I care about, and people that I want to be closer with. I've been applying. I learned about confession about 3 years ago, and the power that it had, and like how much I was able to just relax, and how much happier I've become. There's still the levels of honesty that I haven't attempted, like I had mentioned with my buddy who went up to the women that was saying, I want to fuck you. That's something that I could probably experiment with, but there's definitely a fear that's oriented around that for sure. Yeah, so I guess we're right up at around time now. How can people reach you?
Well, you go to a website at radicalhonesty.com, and I'm on Facebook and all kinds of social media everywhere. Actually, if you just Google me, you can't get rid of me. It's all over the place. And generally, there's good and bad publicity out there. Most of it, fortunately, is good. It's hard to, we have radical honesty workshops here and in Europe, like nearly every weekend, or 8-day long workshops a couple or 3 times a year here or there. And so if you just do radical honesty and look at the current news, you'll find a way to get back to the website. And the website has lots of very thoroughgoing explanations about what radical honesty is about, and a lot of examples. Amazing. And there are lots of other trainers who have written a lot of stuff that's there too. Amazing.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything that we haven't touched on or talked about that you think needs to be tied up before we end the show?
Well, there's one thing that I'm kind of thinking about a lot lately, and that is I'm thinking about designing a workshop that's halfway personal growth and halfway political, because I believe the end result of therapy is that you become compassionate. And that if you're compassionate, given the way the world is right now, you will engage in some kind of community of people attempting to change the world so that less suffering occurs. So I'm working with friends to design a new kind of workshop that's personal growth leading to political change. And I don't know much about it yet. It's just that I basically want to make a correction to the general idea that security involves secrecy, because secrecy is as poisonous for nation states as it is for couples and families. So that's what the theme is of what I'm working on these days. Just wanted to say that.
Amazing. I love it.
Good.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Brad.
Thank you.
I'm going to continue reading your book for the second time through.
Okay.
And the links for your website and the book Radical Honesty and the other books will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks. I enjoyed it. See you later.